Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This is a series that is dedicated to brand new Necromunda players, and the purpose of this series is to help you build your very first 1000 credit list for any campaign of Necromunda. Now, we've been going through every single house gang as well as extended gang and the new rule sets, and on today's episode we're going to talk about the Slave Ogryns. Now, the Slave Ogryns gang actually debuted in the House of Chains, which is the House Goliath supplement to Necromunda. And that supplement was pretty neat because not only did it give you new rules for Goliath, but it also gave you a brand new gang to play if you wanted to. So today we're going to talk about Slave Ogryns gangs. We're going to talk about their strengths. We're also going to talk about their weaknesses. We're going to talk about the individual fighters that make up the gang. I'll give you some tips of how to best equip them. And the last thing we do is go through 3 different sample lists that you guys can use to build your very first gang of Slave Ogryns for your very first campaign in Necromunda. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So when it comes to playing Slave Ogryns, let's go ahead and talk about the strengths of the gang. And quite literally, it's their strength. Strength 5 is standard for every single member of the gang, meaning that they'll be one-shotting enemies in close combat and take them out. And that's exactly what you need to do when it comes to Slave Ogryns. Another thing about them is that they're also literally tough. They have 5 toughness as standard for every single fighter within the gang, which means that most enemies will have to wound you on a 5+ with most weapons. Most weapons that most gangs start off with are strength 3 weapons at the most in some cases, maybe strength 4, but even then though, they're still going to try to hit you on a 5 up because they don't double their strength against your toughness. Meanwhile, for you on the other hand, you'll be basically doing 2+ on wounds for these guys because you're a high strength standard for your characters. At the same time, when it comes to the campaign, they're extremely dangerous during the first starting rounds of a campaign because they outclass most starting gangs in terms of strength and toughness, as well as the weapons that they also carry as well. So as you're beginning the campaign, you're pretty much going to be dominating most fights you're getting into. And another strength about Slave Ogryns is that one of their fighters, which is the Lobo Slave, that fighter cannot be killed under any circumstances. So because of that, they are absolutely unstoppable with their advance. They're savage in close combat, so you can send wave after wave of Lobo Slaves forward to take out your opponent. So now that we're done covering the strength of a Slave Ogryns gang, let's go ahead and talk about its weaknesses. Now, when it comes to their primary weakness, they have very few options in terms of fighters as well as weapons. One of the problems is that this gang cannot purchase any weapons outside of their starting list. So whatever the list they have for their house list, that's the only weapons they can take. Now they can get upgraded equipment as well as war gear, but that's really about it. They can't get weapons from the black market. They can't get weapons from Xenos forms or anything like that. All they get to work with is what they originally start off with. So that part's kind of sad about a Slave Ogryns gang. At the same time, status effect weapons like Ravage, Toxin, Shock, Seismic, these kind of weapons are extremely devastating to a Slave Ogryns gang. And the reason why is because you don't have very many members in a Slave Ogryns gang. So because of that, these status effect weapons kind of circumvent the toughness requirements for your opponents. So this will play murder on your guys' gang. And like I said before, because you're always got a small amount of fighters in your gang, you're always going to be outnumbered. And you're always going to be outgunned as well. And the reason why is because, like I said before, you only have a very few members in your gang. At the same time, when it comes to weapons, your opponents will be able to buy better and better equipment as the campaign progresses, while you're kind of stuck with your basic list. So that's one of the reasons why it's kind of difficult to play a Slave Ogryns game. And then, of course, when it comes to the handicaps for a campaign system, for one thing, you don't receive any enhanced boons for territories. So that's one of the problems that you also have. Secondly, when it comes to outlaw status, you can only take outlaw hired guns. So, of course, that's going to also hinder your ability as well. So those are some of the strengths and weaknesses of the Slave Ogryns gangs. So now that we're done talking about the strengths and weaknesses, let's go ahead and talk about the individual fighters. Alright, up first, let's go ahead and talk about the Ogre Boss, which is your Ogryns leader. He's going to cost you 145 credits. This guy's got a pretty solid stat line too. He's got a 5-inch movement, a weapon skill of 3+, a ballista skill of 5+. He has 5 strength and toughness, 3 wounds, +3 for initiative, 3 attacks. He's got leadership of 8+, a cool of 5+, a willpower of 9+, and an intelligence of 8+ as well. Now, let's go and talk about this guy. So this guy is actually one of the toughest and strongest close combat fighters in the game. So because of that, you want to equip your Ogre Boss with that kind of build in mind. So give him really powerful close combat weapons. Also give him a lot of really good armor and defensive abilities to kind of protect himself as well. At the same time, he also has his group activation. He's the only fighter in the game that can actually do a group activation. However, his group activation is not very good. He only can group activate one. So because of that, more often than not, you actually kind of want to use this Slave Ogryns boss as a leadership support character for the most part. So that way, in terms of his skills anyways, equip him as a close combat machine, but for his skills, give him leadership skills to help kind of mitigate that as well. Also, another thing you need to worry about this guy is that he does only use grenades as weapons for Ogryns, so because of that, he doesn't have access to any guns, so you will be using grenades as his long-range weapon, which is not so bad because basically you get up to 3 times to 2 times the distance for your strength characteristic. So this guy is throwing anywhere between 10 to 15 inches for throwing his grenades. So purchasing grenades for Ogryns, especially for your Ogre Boss, is going to be really good for him to use for his shooting attacks. So that's the thing you want to do with this guy. Alright, up next are your champions. These are your Ogren underbosses. These guys cost 110 credits apiece. They have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 5+ ballistic skill. They have 5 strength and toughness, 3 wounds. They have a 4+ for initiative, 2 attacks. They also have 8 leadership, 7 cool, 9 willpower, as well as 9 intelligence. Now, when it comes to these guys, when it comes to your guys' underboss champions, this is the only champion that cannot, it's one of the handicaps that you have is that this champion is one of the few that can't group activate. So because of that, he really can't group activate with other fighters, and you're going to rely on your leader in order to do that. That's why it's kind of important to give your leader leadership skills, so that way they can take advantage of that and, you know, hopefully get more group activations. However, your underboss though is an excellent close combat fighter, just like your leader. So because of that, you want to equip them as such. Give them really good close combat weapons. Also give them very good armor so that they can survive ladder as well. Now, when it comes to the underboss, as weird as it may seem, even though they're really good at close combat, they're not really meant to fight on their own, and the reason why is because of their cool stat. Their cool stat's only a 7+, so because of that, you do have to worry about them losing their cool because it's kind of an average score. So when you do use these guys, you kind of want to keep them close to the underboss, so that way the overboss could use their gang leader special, so that way people within 12 inches of them can use his cool stat to kind of stay in the fight, because the overboss has a cool of 5, while the underboss has a cool of 7, so you want to keep that in mind as well. Alright, so up next is your guys' Slave Ogryns. These are the gangers that make up your gang. They cost 90 credits apiece. They have a movement characteristic of 5 inches, 4+ weapon skill, 5+ ballistic skill. They have 5 strength and toughness, 2 wounds, 4+ initiative, 2 attacks. They have 8 leadership, 7 cool, 9 willpower, as well as 9 intelligence. So when it comes to your guys' Slave Ogryns, they're basically the only fighters that are capable of bringing a gun to an almost melee exclusive gang for this one. So because of that, you can actually equip them pretty well with some good close combat weapons, and you also get the access to the weapon, the shooting attack. And that shooting attack is a Storm Welder, which you can end up using for that one. Now, here's the thing about the Storm Welder. I keep on looking at all the forums, and I keep on looking at people and hearing things that they got to say about different characteristics about the Storm Welder. A lot of people have a lot of hatred for the Storm Welder. Just for whatever reason, they don't think it's a very good weapon. But in my opinion, and from what I've seen from my gaming group, the Storm Welder is actually a very powerful weapon. Let's go and talk about that real quick. So it's got a short range of 8 inches and a long range of 16 inches. You get +1 to shoot for hit for short range attacks. It's strength 5 with 1 damage. It has ammo roll of 3+. It comes with rapid fire 3. It's also got the reckless trait, the shock trait, as well as the unstable trait as well. So while it is kind of dangerous because it just kind of targets whatever happens to be in its way, it still has that shock characteristic plus that rapid fire skill of a rapid fire 3 and a strength 5 as well. Now granted, the ballistic skill of a regular Slave Ogre is not all that great. It's only a 5 up. But that's not such a big deal, and the reason why it's not such a big deal is because what you need to do is take your Slave Ogryns and get closer distance anyways. So all you gotta do is just get within that 8 inches, so that way you can open fire with that weapon and gets +1 to hit in the close combat, the close range shooting, so it's really gonna help you out. So even though it's got some quirks to it, it's a perfect example of a high risk, high reward type of weapon, and you just want to make sure you're within 8 inches of your enemy before cutting him down. The reason why is because I saw this weapon in action in my last campaign. My friend Smell Like Febreze in our Underworld Underhive Wars campaign, she actually had Slave Ogryns equipped with these guys. And my buddy Brother Grimm, who played a Goliath gang, also put these on his Forgeborn, and they just really kicked butt with these weapons. They just destroyed all kinds of people. So, you know, that thing is kind of mitigated with that. So that's what I believe in the Storm Welder. Alright, so the very last game you have is called the Lobo Slave. These guys cost 70 credits apiece. They have movement characteristic of 4. They have a 4+ weapon skill, 6+ ballistic skill. They have 5 strength, 5 toughness. They have 2 wounds. They have 5+ for initiative, 2 attacks. They have 5 leadership, 5 cool, 10 willpower, as well as 10 intelligence. So let's go ahead and talk about these guys real quick. So because of that, the Lobo Slaves are actually really good for close combat. And the reason why they're so good at close combat is because of their special rules. They have lobotomized, which means that they get by a range attack, they do not become prone and pinned. So that because of that, they're able to just get shot at and not have to worry about getting pinned at all, which is absolutely fantastic for a gang. At the same time, though, there is some handicaps here. They can't take cover, but let's face it, if you're using your Lobo Slaves to take cover, that's not what you're using them for, really. You're basically using them to go forward and to also fight in close combat as well. Now, there is some, of course, some little bit of like negative things attached with these guys. For example, one of the things you got to worry about is that they can't benefit from group activation, so you can't use group activation on these guys because they have the slow-witted skill. And at the same time, they also have very limited learning capacity special rule, which means that they can't become specialists. So that part is kind of a problem, but that's not okay though. And the reason why that's okay is because what you want to do with these guys, you want to use them as unstoppable close combat battering rams. They can't be pinned, so just send them forward to start chopping up guys with some cheap wheelie weapons and just watch them go to town on your opponents. Now, I will say this. If you decide to purchase Lobo Slaves for your gang, you want to make sure you get them hazard suits, alright? That's really important for you guys to do that because those hazard suits are really going to come in handy to help against mitigate a lot of those status effect weapons, because once your opponent realizes what your Lobo Slaves can do, they're going to target them with whatever they can. Flamers, toxic weapons, blaze weapons, whatever. So because they want to make sure you put hazard suits on them, so that way they're protected. So now that we're done talking about the fighters, let's go ahead and talk about your starting lists. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about the cheapskate build real quick. So to create this build, you're going to need 1 box of Slave Ogryns, which contains all 6 fighters. This game is going to cost you 990 credits in order to field these guys. So first of all, your team basically consists of 2 fire teams. You have 1 support team as well as 1 assault team. Your support team consists of your overboss, your underboss, as well as one of your Slave Ogryns, while your assault team consists of Lobo Slave number 1 and Lobo Slave number 2. Basically, the tactic with this build is to move up and to smash your opponent is the name of the game for this gang. So basically, the tactic with this gang is to have your support fire team suppress your enemies with incendiary charges as well as your Storm Welder. At the same time, you flank with your Lobo Slaves using stim slung stashes in order to engage in a coordinated charge with your support team. Catch the enemy in a pincer attack in close combat will pretty much win you this battle. So let's go and talk about the fighters and how they're going to be equipped. For your overboss, it's going to cost you 130 credits. He's got a paired augmented fist. He's also got incendiary charges for that really long distance bombing with the 5-inch blast template. He also has furnace plate as well as armored undersuit to give him a 4-up armor save. He's also got a stim slunk stash, so that way you can also use it to kind of amplify his movement ability as well as his combat ability. And for his skill, you're going to give him commanding presence, so that way he can do group activation with other fighters. Now, after that, you have your underboss. That character is going to cost you 270 credits for this guy. Now, what the character is going to be armed with is going to be armed with an arc welder. He's going to have a spud jacker as well as incendiary charges. So you have the arc welder for blazing close combat weapons, spud jacker so that way he gets 2 attacks, and then of course he's got the incendiary charge for that beautiful 5-inch blast template. He's going to be armed with a furnace plate as well as armored undersuit. He's going to have a stim slug stash as well as bull charge for his abilities. So that way he gets double attacks when he charges forward. Now your Slave Ogre is going to cost you 170 credits. He's going to have a Storm Welder as well as furnace plates, and then your 2 Lobo Slaves will be equipped exactly the same. Both of them will cost you 120 credits. Both will have spud jackers. Both will be equipped with hazard suits, and both will have stim slug stashes in order to engage your opponents. And that makes it what I like to call the cheapskate build. Now the next list is what I like to call the Hunka Hulka Burning Love List is what I call this one. And the reason why is because Flaming Attacks with the Blaze Special Rule is going to be the name of the game for this build. And it's going to cost you 1,000 credits to start your campaign, and once again consists of 2 fire teams. You have 1 support fire team as well as 1 assault fire team. Your support fire team will consist of your Overboss, Underboss number 1, as well as Underboss number 2, and then your assault fire team will consist of Lobo Slaves number 1, 2, and 3. Now the support team takes advances forward is what they end up doing, and they're firing off incendiary charges at their enemies in order to suppress them. And then you do a coordinated charge with your assault fire team, and your support fire team will finish off your opponents. And that's pretty much how it works to catch your opponent in a pincer attack. Now for your Overboss, he's going to cost you 250 credits. He's going to have an Arc Welder for that blazing close combat attack, a Stim Slug Stash. He's also going to have Armored Undersuit as well as Furnace Plates for that 4-up armor save. He's going to have the Commanding Presence ability as well, so that way he can do group activations. Now your Underbosses number 1 and 2 are going to be equipped exactly the same way. They're going to carry 230 crits apiece. Both of them are going to have Arc Welders for those incendiary close combat attacks. They have incendiary charges for long-range shooting. They both have armored undersuits as well as furnace plates for that 4-up, 5-up armor save. And then both are going to get the Nargos skill, which is basically allows them to take an additional action, which is really going to help them out as well. So these guys are close combat assault guys, also throwing incendiary charges to suppress your enemy as well. Now Lobo Slave number 1 is going to cost you 100 credits. This character is going to have a Brute Cleaver as well as a Hazard Suit. Lobo Slave number 2 is going to cost you 95 credits, and same thing with Lobo Slave number 3, because these two are equipped with Spudjackers as well as Hazard Suits as well. And that pretty much makes it the Hunka Hulka Burning Love list. And lastly, we have what I like to call the Super Smash Bros build, and basically this consists of 1 box of Slave Ogryns, and it's going to cost you 1,000 credits in order to field these guys in your campaign. Now for this one, this is the simplest build in order to play, because there's not much in terms of tactics on this one. There's going to be no fire teams in this one. All you're going to do is you can move up as quickly as possible, smash your opponents in the face in close combat. It has no shooting in it whatsoever, and it's all close combat oriented. But let's face it, why bother with shooting and fancy tactics when you can just charge in and crush your opponents to death in close combat? And that's exactly what the name of the game is for the Super Smash Brothers list. So first of all, let's go and talk about your leader real quick. Your leader is going to be your Ogre Boss. He's going to cost you 330 credits. I apologize. He's going to have a Last Cutter for a really good close combat attack with a versatile trait. He's got light carapace armor, giving him that really additional buff to his armor save. He has a Stim Slug Stash as well as 2 axes to use in close combat, and he's got the Nargos skill, which allows him to get that 3rd action in for each of his activations. Then you have 1 Underboss. This fight is going to cost you 265 credits. This character's got 2 Arc Welders, so that way you got 2 blazing attacks. At the same time, he's got the Stim Slug Stash. He has an armored suit with Furnace Plate as well as Bull Charge, so that way he gets twice as many attacks when he charges in. And lastly, you got 3 Lobo Slaves. Lobo Slave number 1, 2, and 3. All 3 of them will cost you 135 credits apiece. All 3 are going to be equipped with 2 Spudjackers, Hazard Suits, and they all have Stim Slug Stashes. And that makes up the close combat oriented Super Smash Bros. List. So there you guys have it. This is our take on your starting list for a Slave Ogryns build for your very first campaign of Necromunda. It is a very interesting game to play. They're very strong, they're extremely resilient, and they're a blast to play. And of course, they can also steamroll over your opponents if you equip them right. I mean, I saw this in our previous campaign with my friend Smells Like Febreze using her Slave Ogryns gangs. However, when it comes to this gang, I would not recommend this gang for a novice player. If you're absolutely brand new to Necromunda and you've never played this game before, I would suggest you go with a different gang instead of using Slave Ogryns. Just because of a lot of the handicaps and the nuances involved with this gang, it might be a little challenging for a brand new player. However, if you're not brand new to Necromunda, or if you don't care about challenge whatsoever, you just want to field some Slave Ogryns, then by all means, go ahead and do so, because it is a challenging game, but it's extremely rewarding when you get to basically smash your opponent's face with this gang. So there you have it, guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to our channel. That's good for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.